Now, whether we are talking about true crime, Coke, Pepsi, PlayStation, Xbox, politics, guys, we all have a certain element of what's called confirmation bias amongst us, right? I was actually watching a YouTube video earlier, and the person was talking about confirmation bias without using the phrase to describe it. The phrase... That is the phrase, you know what I'm saying. But anyways, so ultimately, confirmation bias was the words he was looking for. He had a great video. He described it perfectly. But confirmation bias is what we're going to discuss here today, along with the DNA stuff that's kind of going around. I'm thejbgunner. This is Crime Time. It's going to be kind of a jumbled video. This is just me releasing some thoughts before I get back to my real fucking job over on my other channel. But like I said, I'm thejbgunner. Let's go ahead and get things started. Let's do it. Now, we're going to start off, we will be talking about the DNA. Now, look, guys, there's nothing wrong with confirmation bias. Well, actually, before we get into this, let me first and foremost say thank you to everybody that supports the channel. Any of my channels, regardless of the platform, regardless of the method, whether it's Cash App, Patreon, Venmo, PayPal. Truth is, guys, I couldn't do this each and every day as often as I do if it wasn't for you, the Gun Squad. Big shout out to you guys. And if you too find my content valuable, feel free to hit the links down below. Support the channel. Join the Gun Squad. Also, if you're not a pussy and you can handle a little bit of political debate, you can check out my politics channel, gaming channel, my live stream channel, which I do every single day. Look, let's get into this. I want to start off by saying everyone, and I mean everyone, has some sort of bias based on what it is they portray themselves as. All of us have racial bias. Even you libtards that swear to God you don't. I'm not racist, I'm never. No, stop it. Everyone has a little bit of bias based on the groups that they belong to or that they perceive themselves as, right? Fat people have a little bit of fat people bias. Women have a little bit of pro-women bias. White people are pro-white. Black people are pro-black, except for libtards. They're kind of cucks. Black people are pro-black. People that believe Brian Kohlberger or in the innocent until proven guilty camp, we look for ways to prove innocence until proven guilty. People that believe Brian Kohlberger is guilty, they kind of stick on that side. Now, where that is a little bit different is us that's on the innocent until proven guilty side, we're awaiting that moment that proves guilt. For instance, I was a believer that Richard Allen had not been proven guilty until it was revealed to me that Richard Allen confessed to his mother and wife. And now, despite so many of you guys saying now Richard Allen's not guilty, I am saying Richard Allen is guilty because the motherfucker confessed to his most close people. You guys can come jump through hoops and give me all the reasons you think he confessed, but I'm telling you, once a man says, I murdered these motherfuckers, I'm on the side of believing him, because I've never admitted to a crime I didn't do. I'm just saying, particularly something like murder that may get you the death penalty, that seems kind of stupid. But speaking of stupid, by the way, from now on Fridays, starting next Friday, we will be doing a live stream on this channel where we will highlight the stupid ass comments that we see. Just recently, a couple days ago, I believe, I had a comment that said that the organized frat criminal organization paid Brian Kohlberger to take the fall. You got to be a stupid motherfucker to believe Brian Kohlberger would take any amount of money to take the fall on money for murder cases that would get him the firing squad. You got to be a stupid motherfucker. And then not only that, he did not even use the money to get himself a fucking lawyer. He got a public pretender. Stop it. We'll be discussing them live on Fridays going forward. Probably Fridays, maybe Saturdays, probably Fridays, right? But anyway, back to what I was saying. Everyone has a little bit of, there is confirmation bias. Us, though, if Brian Kohlberger was to come out right now and say, I murdered these motherfuckers, I'd be like, oh, okay, he did it then. You see what I'm saying? Whereas the people that are on the mainstream media side, There is absolutely nothing, a whole other human being could come out and say, I murdered the Idaho 4, and they would be like, nah, Bryan Kohberger still had something to do with it, right? So I believe that us on the innocent till proven guilty side, that would include myself, Harsh, the Truth and who's the Dikey, Truth and Transparency, a couple other people, right? Like they would, we're pretty much the only ones doing it. I believe, though, if Kohberger came out and admitted it, or there was real evidence leading to his guilt, that all of us on the innocent until proven guilty side would say, okay, you win. Okay? Because really all we're standing for is constitutional rights here in America. Because for me to look at someone and especially follow the mainstream media and say, the mainstream media says you're guilty, so I'm going to say you're guilty, to me that feels like a sheepish move, plus it's taking away that man's constitutional rights. Much like the DNA collection might have, which may be the very thing that gets this case thrown out, which we will discuss here in a second. But I just want to make it clear that I want you to think yourself. Look at things from a political spectrum. Most of us are dug in with our beliefs, right? Like, this is why I believe civil war is a must and a probability in America, because each of the two sides are so dug in, there's not going to be any compromise. Everybody has confirmation bias, and we look for things that justify our own belief system, right? And that's on both the left and the right. And that same idea trickles down into almost every avenue of life, right? Now, let's go ahead and get into this, because we're going to be talking about some of this. Let me get this one off. Pay no attention to the playlist that I'm watching right now. I'm a proud white man. I don't deny it. Guys, what we're going to talk about now is the IGG. Because I believe that this is a situation where if certain people didn't have confirmation bias, whether it be Ashley Bumfield, whether it be the people that swear to God Bryan Kohberger is guilty, I think the people, if they did not have confirmation bias, would be able to look at some of this objectively and say, hold on, man, this shit doesn't sound right, okay? None of the IGG genetic genealogy information was used to obtain a single warrant, is what they're saying, used in any form to secure the arrest warrant, and was not presented to the grand jury. That is a lie. It may not have been presented to the grand jury, and I think many of us already knew that, because the truth of this is because of how the profile was obtained. I think that there may be some misconduct. And so that is why they don't want to insert it into the actual legal case. But I want you to understand, for them to say it did not lead to his arrest is complete bullshit. Because the DNA from the knife, who then went through several different organizations in order to find ancestral DNA, is exactly what led to Bryan Kohberger. You cannot say it was the white Elantra, because all the way until like December 8th, they were still looking for a 2011 white Elantra, while claiming that while the PCA claims they were already on to Kohberger, checking him out. The reality of this is that the very thing that pinpointed Bryan Kohberger was ancestral DNA. A small amount of touch DNA that was left on this thing, they ran through several different systems in order to kind of throw it against the wall to see if it stuck. And they eventually did through by digging through his trash, which we'll talk about that here in a minute, which could have been the situation that illegally obtained the ancestral DNA to begin with. But we'll get to this. It says, was not presented to the grand jury. I believe that. The DNA, but I bet you that the idea was presented to the grand jury. I bet you anything, whether they presented the DNA or not, I bet you when they were discussing it with the grand jury, because we don't know because it was private, that at least it had been said the DNA match and this and this. Do you see what I'm saying? But anyway, let's continue. The DNA was identified when BK was arrested. The DNA from the sheath was compared to BK's DNA. Let me explain something to you. That may be when they were able to confirm it was Bryan Kohberger's DNA. But that's not when it was identified. If you look back to his original arrest and you look at all the mainstream media coverage and you look at everything that was being said, it was said then that it had everything to do with the ancestral DNA that led to Bryan Kohberger. They are the ones that said it. They are the ones that announced it publicly to the people, and they are the ones that pushed that information to the media, who ultimately was reporting on it and the grand jury saw. So let me make something clear to you. The grand jury was just normal people in society like you and me that was watching all this media coverage, and all of us heard about ancestral DNA, genealogy DNA over and over and over and over again. So the reality of this is the jury pool was already tainted with this bullshit. Now, let's move on. Let's move on. Guys, if you look at the way that you got to realize this is multiple profiles that are being used in order to get this evidence. So if you look here, the National Library of Medicine, okay? Now they're talking about 4 conceptions about investigative genetic genealogy. Now here's the abstract. Investigative genealogy is a new technique for identifying criminal suspects that has sparked controversy. The technique involves uploading a crime scene DNA to one or more genetic genealogy databases, and this is what we're going to discuss, with the intention of identifying a criminal offender's genetic relatives and eventually locating the offender within the family tree. These are things we already know. IgG was used to identify the Golden State Killer in 2018 and is now being used in connection with hundreds of cases in the USA. Yet as more law enforcement agencies conduct IgG, the privacy implications of the technique have come under scrutiny because we all have what's called a Fourth Amendment. And I will get to that here in just a second. While these issues deserve careful attention, we are now concerned that the discussion is at times based on misunderstandings related to how IgG is used in criminal investigations and how IgG departs from traditional investigative techniques. Here we aim to clarify and sharpen the public debate by addressing 4 misconceptions, which none of these 4 misconceptions are even misconceptions. Nobody even talks about none of that shit. Basically, they go on to talk about how it's practiced, blah, blah, blah. But they ultimately bring up in this is that ultimately the Fourth Amendment is the issue. Now, I want you to, there's something key here, okay? GED match. What we have here, GED match participants can choose to opt in or out of law enforcement. The only other thing that exists that is okay, hold on, let me look for it. Family Tree DNA is another program which maintains a genetic genealogy database of 1.15 million. Adopted a policy permitting law enforcement. So these are the companies, organizations that allow law enforcement to look into this. So things like 23andMe, other things. Let's just be honest. They do not allow law enforcement. They claim to not allow law enforcement. My problem with this is if law enforcement did not use this company, and maybe they use 23andMe, and I think this is why they're not putting it into the court proceedings. If they used they broke into or used a backdoor into let's say 23andMe that claims to not allow law enforcement to do it. Let me give you an example. You know how Twitter and Facebook and all of them gave law enforcement kind of a backdoor hub to get into say they wanted to analyze your inbox and things like this. You and me, the public, we were told that did not exist, but we found out in the Twitter files that indeed law enforcement not only influenced these social media giants to be able to, take away whatever they want, whatever law enforcement wanted, whatever the case may be. But also we came to find out that they actually had a backdoor hub to where law enforcement can literally log in. With that being the case, if a company like 23andMe, who claims to you that law enforcement does not have that ability, has somehow given law enforcement, the FBI, a backdoor hub into their system, and the FBI obtained, let's say, the Kohlberger family's DNA through, let's say, 23andMe instead of family tree DNA, that would mean that the DNA was illegally obtained. Evidence illegally obtained leads to what? This is why, in my opinion, and if you look at the paperwork from how they always talk about like evidence, how each piece of evidence is numbered. You ever notice that evidence like 1 and 2 are disqualified? Like they're always not disqualified. What's the word I'm looking for? So it's early. You can't see it. God damn it! I can't fucking think of it. Redacted. Redacted is the word, right? Why is that? Now, the likely scenario is that evidence pieces number 1 is going to be the DNA, because that is essentially how they located and found Kohlberger. That is how this shit went. So anyway, if they obtained that evidence illegally, then clearly they wouldn't want to put that in the court proceedings at trial. So what they're going to do now is use the other evidence that they ended up obtaining legally, which is Kohlberger's actual DNA following the arrest. That is the evidence that they want to put forward, because that's the evidence that they obtained legally through his arrest. The problem is that the arrest might have been illegal because the obtaining of the evidence that led to his arrest could have been illegal. Let's continue. Let's continue here. If you look back here, quadruple Idaho murder suspect Brian Kohlberger's lawyer accused the FBI of interfering with genetic expert witness in the trial, claiming they interrogated her at her home. Remember, the defense brought in Gabriela Vargas. Okay, the suspect, his main lawyer, Ann Taylor, said genetic genealogy expert Gabriela Vargas, who recently spoke in court about the DNA matching, has been harassed by the FBI shortly after she took the stand. She was visited by 2 FBI agents and interrogated about her testimony and findings in the declaration. So this woman came, this expert in the field, came to the defense's aid. The FBI then went and intimidated her. And of course, the defense is saying, hey, this in our view imposes on Kohlberger's due process rights. Of course it does. Whenever look, if you had a witness against, if Brian Kohlberger himself or anybody related to Brian Kohlberger were to contact witnesses of the state, that would be called witness intimidation. The FBI agreed in Ms. Vargas' claim that some of what her declaration she had inadvertently agreed to or signed without fully reading it. Listen to what? After the FBI came to see Mrs. Vargas, she kind of pulled back on what she was saying in court. I wonder why that is. Why is the FBI into this? Even Fox News will admit FBI investigates key witness. So the FBI clearly went after this woman. I'm curious why this is. Now, here's the thing. So not only do we have a situation where potentially the DNA was obtained under let's say, non-legal circumstances, but we have a situation where the whole, what's it called, Giglio Brady? Prosecutors disclose internal affairs investigation of officer involved in Idaho college murders case. We talked about this. Latah County prosecutors, and they didn't do this because they wanted to. They did it because, well, they had no real choice, right? Latah County prosecutors have disclosed an internal affairs investigation of a police officer involved in the case against Brian Kohlberger. The investigation has disclosed a potential Brady Giglio material, the court filing said. Prosecutors must provide exculpatory information to defense counsel. That is what the Brady decision is. Under Giglio, the Supreme Court ruled prosecutors must disclose certain information that could call a witness' credibility into question, such as promises of immunity or reduced charges and or sentences. Now, I'm curious, we keep hearing throughout this case that they won't provide certain information, at least publicly, because it could put witnesses in danger. Who's the witnesses? Remember that they said that not Dylan Mortensen, but the other broad, that she had exculpatory evidence that could potentially lead to the release of Bryan Kohberger. I find this very, very interesting when we're looking at the way the DNA was obtained. Then, of course, we have the Brady Giglio situation with a cop involved in the investigation. And when you look at the simple concept of what this means, the prosecutor's job is to provide exculpatory evidence. Now, despite what Bumfield says, no, Bryan Kohberger is not being given a gift by being given potentially exculpatory evidence, including the DNA. But I want you to understand the mainstream media, all these YouTubers that are pro sucking off the fucking mainstream media, they're overlooking every last bit of this. Anybody that is being objective would look at this and say, hold on, man. So the very cop, one of the very cops involved here is under investigation for not handing over exculpatory evidence anyway? Or any of these things? He's already involved in something like this? Plus now they're not wanting to hand over how they obtain certain things. They're not even wanting to, his DNA, they're not even wanting to present it to court or the grand jury. And nobody has a problem with this. The answer's simple. It's because everybody has confirmation bias. A phrase coined by English psychologist Peter Wasson is the tendency of people to favor information that confirms or strengthens their belief or values and is difficult to dislodge once confirmed. That's how this shit works. It's an example of cognitive bias, of course. Now, I want you to see something real quick. This is the prosecutor. I want you to listen carefully. Imagine, Jay Sleuthing right here says, imagine not documenting something or documenting steps that has to do with how you arrested a defendant. All this adds up. Imagine how something as important as that magically and suddenly just doesn't exist. Imagine thinking it's no big deal. Ain't that a bitch? Why is it that the prosecution is so scared to reveal the information that lets Bryan Kohberger know how he was arrested to begin with, lets you, the public, know? Because make no mistake about it, you should know. I'll show you. I'll show you here in just a second. Where am I looking at right here? Hold on, I'm going to show you right now. Give me just a second, then we'll get to all that. Hold on, the ACLU, blah, blah, blah. I want to show you. Just give me a brief second here. Because there's something that I saw that I did want to, the bottom line, okay, right here, ABA. The policies and procedures employed for testing DNA evidence should be available for public inspection. If you don't know what the ABA is, these are criminal justice standards, okay? These are criminal justice standards. And it goes through everything. Scopes, general principles, general standards, all of this exists, right? And so it's saying that these samples should be by consent and should be made available to the defendant for not just his inspection, but public inspection. Now let's get back to where we was at over here. Because this man doesn't want you to have it.
I will say, listening to Ms. Taylor's recitation of all sorts of specific types of stuff that, based on our understanding, there are items that she thinks ought to be there that do not exist.
They don't exist anymore. They just don't exist anymore.
In any fashion, we will give you everything that we are provided with, and we have asked for everything that exists, both from the private lab and from the FBI.
Imagine one of the biggest murder cases in the entire country where somebody's life is on the line, and people are saying, hey, the shit that we started with the investigation that led to his arrest, man, that shit, well, yeah, we kind of lost it. Then throw the case out. Then throw the goddamn case out. If you don't have the fucking shit, and you're not, this is why it's taken 9 discovery motions to get to where we are today. Because the prosecution doesn't want to give Brian Kohlberger what he's fucking entitled to. And you get all these fucking bootlicking jackoffs in the true crime community that just suck the fucking, the ooze out of the mainstream media and FBI's dick. Just suck the ooze right out of it. These motherfuckers, they literally will not acknowledge that this is fucked up. What if an innocent man gets put to death with the firing squad? And you got these motherfuckers saying, well, we lost the evidence, fuck it, just try him anyway, put him to death anyway.
Yeah, and that's our intention. But I don't think that the lawyers ought to get into the guessing game with what should and shouldn't be there, particularly since it is our position the defense has a fundamental misunderstanding of the difference between SNP profiles and traditional DNA comparisons and how that process works. When we start talking with statistics and those sorts of things, those don't necessarily apply in the investigative genealogy world.
Well, let us know. Show us.
False expectations. And I certainly don't want the court to be misled that things of relevance exist that do not.
Well, then you shouldn't have lost the goddamn material.
Well, I understand that issue to some degree because I've been reading your briefs back and forth. So I understand that that is a repeated kind of issue, and I think, excuse me if I'm wrong about this, Ms. Taylor, but they want to be able to see what has not been documented. So that's one of the issues that it's going to be a struggle about. I understand that the process, the procedures of some of these IGG procedures are not documented. There might be some notes. I understand the FBI has some notes. So let's start where we know we have things.
Excuse me. So, these motherfuckers, the FBI can tell you everything in the world about you. When you take a shit, who you fucked last, but you're telling me these cocksuckers can't tell you about how they arrested a dude on a quadruple murder? Guys, the DNA, let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about this. In 1978, the Supreme Court ruled that the Fourth Amendment does not protect the contents of people's trash left for pickup. That's left for pickup, and I keep hearing this in the comment section. They didn't get it from the street. They went onto the neighbor's property, to the house where trash cans were up against the house, and took the property. Do you understand? Trash abandoned and left for pickup is trash put at the street for pickup. And let me also explain this, okay? Even if the police do not need a warrant to rummage through your trash, they shouldn't need a warrant to rummage through your DNA. Your DNA is not something thrown out. It's something accidentally dropped. Like if you accidentally drop your wallet, it's still yours. If someone steals the money out of your accidentally dropped wallet, you can still get them for theft. A DNA sample, whether taken directly from a person or extracted from items that person leaves behind, contains in a person's entire genetic makeup. It can reveal intensively sensitive information about us, including our propensities for certain medical conditions, our ancestry. By the way, they said it was a sample of his father's. His father was a free man. A free man. If you look at Carpenter versus the United States, check this shit out. As the Supreme Court recently made clear in Carpenter versus the United States, a case argued by the ACLU, old rules permitting warrantless searches cannot be automatically extended to new police capabilities made possible by modern technologies. The scope and types of information that might be discovered through a search of one's physical trash pail in comparison to the deeply sensitive and highly personal information our genetic blueprints can reveal. And though people might sometimes be able to avoid discarding certain physical items, they cannot avoid shedding DNA on virtually every surface and object that they touch. Our DNA requires greater protections under the Fourth Amendment. And that is what the argument is essentially. If you already participate in online genetic testing, you may be wondering, can DNA be used without your consent? Or more specifically, can your DNA be used against you? Not anymore. At least not without your knowledge. SB 41 now requires all direct-to-consumer genetic testing companies, Ancestry.com, 23andMe, to provide consumers with the company's policies and procedures for the collection, use, maintenance, and disclosure. Further, under the updated protections provided by this law, you can revoke your consent and seek civil penalties in cases where your DNA privacy was violated. Now, why do I say that? Why do I say that? Because ultimately, your DNA being unlawfully obtained or analyzed or looked into would be considered a violation of your Fourth Amendment. While these protections are comforting, there's a balance between protecting the privacy of private citizens and protecting public interest. And I understand, and this is the argument that exists. According to Prop 69, you can have your DNA test taken if arrested for a felony or very select serious misdemeanor convictions. Now, that's what eventually happened to Bryan Kohberger. That is not what's being argued. What's being argued is the way was it legal or illegal the way you conducted it in the beginning to begin with? If evidence was obtained leading to his arrest, if it was illegally obtained, then the bottom line of this is the case has to be thrown out, or that evidence has to be thrown out. And if you throw out the DNA evidence against Bryan Kohberger, you have nothing. There is no Supreme Court ruling with a lot of these DNA cases at this point in time. So a lot of this stuff is still up in the air. Let's talk about the exclusionary rule for just a second. In the United States, the exclusionary rule is a legal rule based on constitutional law that prevents evidence collected or analyzed in a violation of a defendant's constitutional rights, like the Fourth Amendment, from being used in the court of law. This may be considered an example of a prophylactic rule formulated by judiciary in order to protect a constitutional right. The exclusionary rule may also, in some circumstances, at least be considered to follow directly from the constitutional language, such as Fifth Amendment's command that no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. Now let's look at the Fourth Amendment. It is intended to protect citizens from illegal searches and seizures. It's designed to provide a remedy and disincentive for criminal prosecution from prosecutors and police who illegally gather evidence in violation of the Fifth Amendment and its protection against self-incrimination. The exclusionary rule also protects against violations of the Sixth Amendment, which guarantees the right to counsel. Now, the rule is occasionally referred to as a legal technicality. And that's essentially what we're talking about when we're talking about this case with the DNA right now. Was it obtained legally or was it not? And if it wasn't, then unfortunately for the Idaho 4, you have to throw out this case on a technicality. The entire case would be therefore based on an illegal search and seizure, thus violating Brian Kohlberger's Fourth Amendment. Therefore, you must throw out the case due to a technicality. Now, when we get back to confirmation bias, you'll get all the dick riders that will literally say, no, he's the guy, send him to the fucking firing squad. Who cares about Brady Giglio? Who cares about police corruption? Who cares about Hunter Biden's laptop? Who cares? You get those cocksuckers. And it's really strange how that works. Because a lot of times those same people, well, I'll just leave it at that. We'll leave it there. The reality of this is this brings up enough reasonable doubt that no man should be sent to a firing squad for this, even if he did it. It's better to let out one murderer than have a corrupt system that does not work for its people, that is violating constitutional rights. Let me tell you, Benjamin Franklin, those that give up liberty for safety deserve and will have neither. You people that are willing to throw away your liberty in the trash can, your constitutional rights in the trash can, so you feel a little safer, you deserve neither. That's the truth. That's reality. I would rather let one murderer walk, 10 murderers walk, than put one innocent person to death. Is Brian Kohlberger innocent or guilty? I don't know. But you haven't proven that he is. And if you're going to go through underhanded techniques in order to convict him, I'd rather see him walk. Hashtag free Brian Kohlberger. Or get your shit together, prosecution. It's that simple. Guys, if you like what I do here, feel free to hit the links down below. Join the Gun Squad. Support us today. Guys, curious what your thoughts are on this confirmation bias, on this DNA. Do you think it was collected legally? I don't. Or what is the reason that they have such a problem with handing it over in discovery? And why is Bumfield saying it's a gift to the defense? No, man. It's not. Discovery is not a gift at all. I'm thejbgunner. This is crime time. Let me get to my real work. If you guys want to support the channel, look, I'm just going to call it what it is. I'll post more over here. But I don't do this shit for free, motherfuckers. There's a reason I post more on other channels. I'll see you guys later. I'm out.